The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Organizational Excellence's Career Bootcamp webcast series. Today's session is entitled Test-Taking Strategies for Classified Jobs with Linda Dark. Hey, before we begin the program, let's take a look at the program we'll be using for those who aren't familiar with the GoToWebinar interface. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the GoToWebinar control panel. You have the option of selecting telephone or mic and speakers for the audio portion of today's program. If you're using the mic and speakers portion of the program and you experience difficulty in hearing at any time, go ahead and click on the settings link in order to open up a dialog box where you can select your speakers or headset if you're using a headset. If you're asked at any time during the presentation to raise your hand, there's a raised hand icon that you can click on. They'll show us that your hand is raised. For example, if Linda says, how many people have experienced this? Right. If you find that you have questions anytime during the program, you can type them into the questions dialog box and then click the send button or hit the return key to send that question to us. And we'll try to answer when we find a convenient portion within the program to do so. If you find that sometime during the presentation your GoToWebinar control panel collapses down to a control bar, you can click the orange arrow button at the top in order to expand it back out. Now, sometimes the program audio or visual may lag due to network congestion. In most cases, the program will catch up once the congestion clears. And we'll also upload a recording of this program to Learning Zone after the session in case you'd like to review it again in the future. Now, Linda Dark is a human resources specialist from our Talent Acquisition and Selection branch. In that capacity, Linda works with internal clients analyzing their staffing needs and develops innovative recruitment and selection plans. She also develops, validates, and oversees the execution of a variety of assessment methods. Linda also leads social media recruiting and branding efforts and is responsible for developing and posting materials on various social media platforms. And now we'll listen to Linda Dark.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Bob. Before I continue, I just want to make sure that you all can hear me. So if you wouldn't mind just hitting that little virtual hand of yours. All right, excellent. I think we're in business. That's good. It would be bad if I'd go through this whole thing and then finding out that you didn't hear me. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. So I hope you're going to find this session helpful and that it's going to make you feel better prepared for your next employment test. So as Bob mentioned, I have a lot of experience creating and administering employment tests for LAUSD. So when it comes to testing, I'm really an excellent source or a resource for you. So my hope is that you will take advantage of this opportunity and please ask me all the questions that you have relating to this topic. And you know, you may never have a better opportunity to learn about the LAUSD testing process. So I really welcome your questions. So before we get started into the material, let me point out a couple of good news, bad news. The bad news is there are no magic tricks on how to do well on our employment tests. But the good news is that all of our tests are completely 100% job related. So if you know the job and you have the skills to do a job, you're going to do well on the test. And if you prepare for the job, you're even better, more likely to do better. So it's not a magic show we're doing here, but we're going to be talking about how to prepare and how to get the strategy going to prepare for the test. And so this session is going to show you what you can do to prepare by knowing what to look for, what questions to research, what material to prepare, and where to look for answers. So let's go through the process. We're going to talk about where to find the job, what to look for in the job bulletin, which is the job posting. We're going to talk about what competency-based testing is, because that's what we're doing. We always say we have competency-based testing, but what does that mean? And then we're going to talk about some of the most commonly used test parts, and we're going to talk about how to prepare to take those tests. So before we get started, actually, I want to emphasize the importance of making the computer your best friend. We do everything via the computer these days. So when you're looking for a job, you're going to be doing that through the computer. When you're applying for the job, you're going to be doing that via the computer. When you're communicating about that job, or when we're communicating with you, that will be done via email. So make the computer your best friend if it isn't already. And if that's not possible, then you need to find a friend or a relative that is friends with Mr. Computer to help you out. Also for you guys who are LUSD employees, something that's important to know is that you're going to have to use your @lusd.net email address. There are no other options. So if you don't have access to your lusd.net account, you all have one, but you may not have activated it. If you have not activated it, before you start the application process, you will need to contact our ITD department and have that taken care of. On our website, you can find instructions on how to contact them and get this whole process going. So how to find the job? Well, this is what our website looks like. It's www.lusdjobs.org. And I'm actually going to take you to our website right now, right here. So this is where you land when you go to our website. So as you can see here in the middle of the page is the View Jobs and Apply. You can click that, then you will go to Support and Technical Jobs, your employees of the district, so you will click on LUSD employees. And here are the lists of the promotional opportunities that are available for you. So from here you can click on a job, and here is the job posting or the job bulletin. We will get into more detail about what to do with this in a little bit. Oh, it was just brought to my attention that you can't see all the clicks that I'm doing here. Well, all right. So hang on just a quick second. Let me see if I can. Okay. All right, let's see if this works better. No, I don't think that you can see it. Well, that's unfortunate. All right, so let me go back to that first page then. See if you can see if I scroll at least. Yeah, you see that. Okay. All right. So okay. So then your options are then from the home page. Oh, it changed there. Okay. I'm so sorry for the confusion, guys. So this is the home page. So your options are to view jobs and apply, and then it will be pretty evident to you what to do from there. The other way to do it is to scroll down to the bottom, and I believe you will see this, yes. So down here in the bottom right-hand corner, you have jobs open to the public, LUSD promotional opportunities, upcoming job opportunities, the career bulletin, which is really just listing all of the positions that we're currently recruiting for in a maybe a little bit more visually pleasing format. So what you can do here is just to click on the jobs to see what we have open for you. If you want to see what's coming up, you can click on upcoming job opportunities. And you guys won't be able to see this, but when you click on that, on the very top of that page, it's going to say receive a job alert in case you're interested in a job that is not currently open, and we're not planning to opening it anytime soon, so it's not listed on this page. You can sign up for any of the positions that we have, and as soon as we're opening it up, you will receive an email notification to alert you, which is a really neat feature. Just know that it's good for 12 months though, so you'd have to renew it every 12 months. So on this page also, down by the quick links, you can see that there are the links or the quick links to our social media sites. If you're anything like me, yeah, the website's great. You can go there and find out information. But you know, you have to go back, remember to check the website every so often to make sure that you're not missing out. If you are following us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, you will be actually getting that information pushed to you, so you won't miss out. All right, now let's get back to our, okay, so being the social media person that I am, I highly recommend you check us out on the social sphere. And you can also ask questions, and it's a very interactive process. So we welcome you and your participation. So you couldn't see this before, but I was pulling up the job posting. So when you find a job that you're interested in and you're going to apply for it, you click on it. The first thing that will pop up is the job bulletin. And make sure that you read this. This is a lot of applicants overlook the importance of reading it. They just kind of skim through it or just skip it altogether and just get straight to the applying for the job. And this is a huge mistake, because in the job bulletin, as an analyst, I'm putting all of the information that I can about the test and about the job in the job bulletin. Everything that I'm able to share, I'll put in there. So if you're not reading that properly, then you're going to be missing out a lot of useful information that's going to allow you to be properly prepared. And just to let you know, it's when candidates call me afterwards and ask me questions that are already in the job posting, I'm not impressed. So you may want to keep that in mind. You know, just make sure that you read this thoroughly before you get started. So when you read the bulletin, there are a couple of things that you maybe should pay special attention to. First of all, the minimum qualifications. Before you even apply, do you meet them? Are you even eligible to apply for this job? And so if you're not, then you probably shouldn't apply, because you're just going to get a disqualification letter right away saying that you're not meeting them. We don't have a lot of leeway at all in terms of being flexible. This really is the minimum requirements. Then we have the competencies, and the competencies are, you know, the skills and abilities or work-related behaviors that are needed to be successful in a particular job. And so all of the core ones, the crucial ones, are going to be in the bulletin. And there's a very good chance if they're in the bulletin, they're going to be on the test. So that's why it's very important. So even as early as this stage, before you've even applied, you can sort of figure out what things might be covered in the exams. So that's pretty cool, and I think you can see how you don't want to lose out on this opportunity. So even if the job posting is a little long, I know, and there's a lot of information, I know, but it is useful information, so don't skip it. You'll also find information about the test process. So we'll talk about what the tentative testing schedule looks like, what test parts are going to be included. So that's kind of nice to get a heads up. The test dates will also be there if they are if they're decided on. So you can mark that on your calendar and make sure that you're available. Unfortunately, we're usually not able to accommodate special scheduling for anyone that's not available. So it's good to know that ahead of time so that you're available and don't miss out on maybe an opportunity you've been waiting for a year or two. So competency-based testing, what is it? Well, we talked about the competency being skills, abilities, or job-related behaviors. And so that means that when we design our tests, we design them to assess the ones that we have, through analysis, determined crucial for that particular job. And so, again, the bulletin is giving it to you. So there's no reason why you shouldn't go there and figure out what they are and start getting prepared to answer, to do well in these tests. So how do we measure or assess a competency? Well, you know, it really depends on the competency that we're looking at. So let's say we have math skills. We would probably do a written test and have a multiple choice type of a question. If we're looking at, on the other hand, maybe oral communication, then interview would be more suitable. And if we're doing, let's say, mechanical skills, then we would probably do a performance test, right? So next up, we're going to be going over the most commonly used test parts and talk about what they are and give you some tips on how to prepare for them. So the written test is usually the first test part in any test process. And our written tests are multiple choice, and they're computerized. And they're designed to measure, specific information, job knowledge kind of knowledge. So we have here a sample test question. I think the written test is the part that confuses candidates the least. This is something that you've probably seen all of your life, and so we're not doing it any different than any other multiple choice test you've ever encountered. So there's going to be the question. You're going to have usually 4, sometimes more though, different alternatives to choose from, and you're going to pick the one that you think is correct. So how do we prepare for a written test? Well, again, I can't emphasize this enough. You want to go back to the bulletin so you'll know what areas are likely to be covered. Actually, I will, in my job bulletins, I'll specify the subtests for the written test in the job bulletin. So you can actually, even ahead of time, know and anticipate what kinds of things that you're going to need to studying up on. Because that will be your next step, just to study. So depending on the areas, you'll know where to find that and to brush up on some of the information that maybe you haven't visited in a while. So just study and just try to storing the facts as best as you can. That would be your best strategy to prepare for a written test. So on the day of the test, I actually would argue that probably before the day of the test, you should read the instructions in the invitation letter carefully. Again, I realize that sometimes there's a lot of information on that letter, but it's there for a reason. So it's going to probably be important that you know all that information. Also, you may want to maybe Google the address if it's a test site that you have never been to before. I actually have some candidates that will drive to the test site ahead of time just to kind of know how to get there and know where to park, so that the morning of the test or the day of the test they can arrive early and be in a calm state of mind and then prepared to do well on the test. You also want to make sure that you pay attention to the details of the instructions given in the written documents and by the proctors so that you know how to proceed. Also, you will not be able to take the test unless you have with you a valid ID and your Social Security card or your district ID. I'm serious. They will probably turn you away if you don't have these documents. So don't be sloppy and forget these things. And they're also going to be specified in the invitation letter along with anything else that maybe you need to bring. Another reason to make sure that you read the invitation letter carefully. So at the beginning of the test, you want to plan and budget your time so that you don't get rushed or won't have time to finish the test. And you also may want to bring a watch to help pace yourself in case there's no wall clock. Okay.
The question is, why don't we ever follow through with that? Do not turn it away.
Oh, okay. So did they hear the question? Okay, so there's a question here. Why do they never follow through with that? They do not turn you away. Sometimes I feel they should. If we're denied for not meeting needs, they should be denied for not following directions. Well, I can't answer to that because I have proctors calling me all the time to find out if we are letting them test or not, and we are. There have been some exceptions, and so depending on the case, but they will have to do. It's been very rare though, and there's been a good reason for it, and they would have to verify it after the fact. But I would say that 99% of the time, the proctors do send people away. So if you have a real concern about that, I would suggest that you contact the analyst that is in charge of that exam if you feel like it's not fair or that there's something going on, just to kind of get an explanation, because we want to be transparent and make sure that you guys understand what's going on and that we're not playing favors or doing anything that we shouldn't be doing. Integrity is something that we really value in our testing process, and so if you have concerns, I encourage you to contact the analyst in charge. So I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to just throw in a couple of more. So for now, we'll just continue with the training, and we'll move into while you're taking the written test. So when you take the test, you want to, first of all, make sure that you answer all of the questions. What I do is if I get stuck on a question or I'm not really sure, I use the scratch paper and I'll write down the question number. And then that way, if I have time left over at the end, I can go back and rework it. So you don't want to waste time there. Make sure that you get through the whole test. Also, pay notice to the subtests, because each area that we're testing is going to have a little header, so you'll know what area we're going to be testing so you can focus appropriately. And also use that scratch paper just to, take notes, draw out problems, create charts, whatever you need to do that will help you focus and relax. And at the end of the time, if you have, or at the end of the test rather, if you have time left, you want to make sure that you use that time effectively. So this is when you go back to those notes, if you took them, of the question numbers that you may want to revisit and maybe work on them again. I do want to bring to your attention, though, that usually the answer that comes to mind first is often the correct one. So keep that in mind when you're considering changing your answers. Okay, so if there are any questions about the written test, please shoot them out right now, and you'll have time throughout the presentation, at the end of the presentation, to do it if something pops up at a later time. But we're now going to move into the next test part, which is the training and experience evaluation, or more commonly referred to as a T&E. A T&E is really assigning a score to information that's contained in your application packet. It can be any information in your application, but will usually be a scored questionnaire, which is a set of job-related questions that you have to complete as part of your application. So T&Es can sometimes be a little confusing to candidates because they're usually done as the first test part. And it is a test part, but you don't have to physically be present. So really what can happen is you submit an application, then you receive a letter saying that, oh, you didn't pass the test, and so you're not continuing in the process. And you go, hey, wait a minute, I haven't taken a test, and I meet the minimum qualifications. What do you mean I can't continue? Well, this is the thing, though. Everyone that moves on to the T&E is going to meet the minimum qualifications. The T&E is not screening you for EQs. Rather, it's a test part to kind of sort the top competitors out. And so it's just a test part like any other test part. And I think that can be the confusing part to some people. Another thing to keep in mind is that T&Es can be very competitive. And it's not always a matter of just how qualified you are for the job. It's how qualified you are in relation to the other people that are competing for this job. So take yourselves, look at your, or not look at them maybe, but think about your coworkers and imagine that you're applying for the same job. You compare yourself to a few of them and maybe you're going to come out ahead of them, but you compare yourself to a couple of other of them and maybe you're falling a little short. That's the same idea actually with any part of our testing process, but especially for T&Es, I think that could be a helpful way of thinking about it. So application material that we use for T&Es will be evaluated and scored based on the recency, the level and complexity, the scope, the quality and quantity, and the depth and the breadth of your training and experience as you describe it. So how do we score it? Well, there are two different ways of scoring a T&E, one rater scored version and a self-scored version. So the self-scored version has two raters that independently assess the application material, and then following set guidelines, they will assign it an overall score at the end. And the self-scored version, that's when you fill out a questionnaire as part of your application. And each of the responses have a predetermined score attached, so your answers automatically end up with an overall score. So when preparing your application packet for a rater-scored T&E, there are some points to keep in mind. They're pretty important. The raters are not expected to read between the lines or make sense of unclear information. So you want to make sure that you present the information in a clear and complete manner. And you're also, or they're also not expected to know details about your education or particular job titles. So this is not the place to be vague. Okay, so we have a question. Why doesn't your department ever view the attachments to the application? Okay, I had an experience where they disqualified me, but had they looked at the education section and the attachment, they would not. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so for certain jobs, you're going to be required to attach certain documents to your application. So and those are, you know, let's say there's a certification or something that you need that you have to attach to the application. Other than that, yes, and so typically it's not. People may look at the attachments, but they also may not, because when you fill out the regular body of your application, you're expected to include all the information that we ask you. So you're not actually filling out the application appropriately if you're leaving some of that information out. It's not to be put in an attachment to it. It makes the process much more complicated for us, and it makes it easier for us to overlook some of the information, such as in your case. And so just make sure that when you fill out your profile, and the good news is you only fill out the profile once, so that's not job specific. So your profile you can fill out at any time. You don't have to apply for a job to do it, but so you can do that today. You can fill out your profile. Let's say you're taking another class or you're getting some other additional work experience. You can update your profile. I actually highly encourage you to do that, so that it's always up to date. So when you do apply, it's ready to go, and you don't have to do that again. Okay, so the question continues. You didn't leave it out, but you said that it wasn't enough. But it should be required for the T&E scores. My attachments are always there. Well, I can't really speak for your particular case, because it depends on how the T&E is set up. Sometimes it's, so I don't know for your particular job, but sometimes you're being asked to present it in a particular way. And so if you didn't include that information right there, then that would be the case. So I would actually just, again, recommend that you just contact the analyst and just kind of find out from them. And you can do that now if you're concerned. Next time, you ask before you submit the information to get clarification. All right, so thank you for those questions. We will be moving on to what raters also are not expected to do. Well, you want to make sure that you take your time and do a careful job when you present the information, because raters are not expected to be lenient for poorly presented content. So make sure that that's taken care of. So keep this in mind. The information that you submit will be evaluated as is, and you're not going to have second chances to change it or add to it. So the bottom line is, it's really your responsibility to communicate your qualifications. And so you do this successfully by following the instructions and by making sure your information is thorough and presented in a clear and organized manner. I have somebody that I work with a lot in the district on different exams was taking a test for a job, a promotion for him. It wasn't my exam, but he contacted me and he was depressed because he had been disqualified, or he had failed the T&E. He's like, I have all this experience, and I know that I'm more than qualified for the job, and I believe him because I know him, I know his background, and I know that particular job. However, when I reviewed the T&E, he didn't include any of it. And so when they were scoring it, there was no way that they could give him a higher score than they did. So let Danny's mistake be a lesson for you to learn, and then make sure that you don't repeat that mistake. Rather, keep a couple of things in mind here. You want to make sure that you include the information that's requested by you. Make sure it's specific, clear, and accurate, and that it's easy to read and to understand. So before you submit it, double check everything. And I think it's highly advisable that you have a colleague or a friend, somebody that maybe knows the job a little bit also, check your work and for you to give feedback. Okay, are there any more questions at this point about the T&Es or any other material that we've covered so far? I know it's dense, lots of information to take in. All right, I don't see anything right away, but feel free to hop in at any time. We're going to move on to the next test part, which is the performance test. And a performance test is a real work situation that's replicated to test a candidate's ability and skill in performing a critical job duty or job duties. So as a candidate, you can expect to be evaluated by a committee that consists of experts in that specific professional field. So the most common performance test is the job task. So for instance, one of my exams is bus driver, school bus driver. So the performance test part of this exam is a bus inspection to make sure that the vehicle is safe before they drive it. There's then the drive test, and then lastly they have to do a backing up maneuver thing. And this is being done with a rater watching them, and they are going to have to kind of explain what they're doing as they're doing it. Safety is a huge thing with performance tests, and if a candidate's acting in a way that the rater deems dangerous to people or equipment, they will stop it and the test will be over. Another type of performance test that's not used as frequently, but for certain types of jobs, it's an excellent selection tool that we use, and it's the in-basket. So with the in-basket, the candidate's giving a manager's inbox all kinds of emails and memos and a bunch of different scenarios and all kinds of things. It's information overload. And then they're asked to kind of sift through these and prioritize and respond to the content. And then raters will evaluate the results and see how they were doing, if they were prioritizing and organizing appropriately. So really, how do you prepare for a performance test? Well, really the only way to do well on a performance test is to know how to do the job, right? And how to do it well. So the best way to prepare yourself is really just to practice. All right, here comes the grand flagship of job tests, right? The job interview, and usually that's the part that stresses candidates out the most. So there's a quote here I'll be reading. It takes a well thought out strategy, proper mental preparation, and insight into the prospective employer to pull off a winning interview. So, well, the point of this training today is to teach you the tricks to develop that strategy and to give you some insights into LUSD. So hopefully that'll allow you to, properly prepare mentally. And so after this session, I have faith that you will be equipped with the knowledge on how to pull off that winning interview. So for LUSD, the typical interview is usually the last test part. And it's done in a video and tape recorded room. Don't worry, nobody's sitting there listening and watching your every move. Really the only time that they will be visited are in case of an appeal. You will have 2 raters on your committee. The interviews usually last between 15 and 45 minutes. And it's very structured and consistent. So we're giving each candidate the same questions in the same order, and it's always based on job-related job tasks. So there's not going to be any surprises or trick questions. So that's the good news. And then lastly, when the raters are giving you a score, they're going to be using, structured and consistent rating standards that are predetermined to allow for the process to be standardized and as fair as possible. So the different types of interviews that we're utilizing is the general fitness interview, which is really just to see if you have, the general, usually the softer skills for a job. When it comes to more, technical knowledge and more job-specific industry kind of knowledge, then we're moving into maybe the technical interviews. So it's really just a differentiation in terms of the kind of skills that we are assessing in the interview.
Would you recommend bringing samples of work done and show it to the raters?
Okay, so we have a question here. Would you recommend bringing samples of work done and show it to the raters? I would say I would say that if you have it, I would bring it. It's not always going to make a difference, but it's never going to be a bad thing at this stage. And so if you're probably all familiar with this because you've taken our tests before being LUSD employees, you're going to be doing, to get on the eligibility list, you'll take this interview with us, and then there'll be an additional interview with the department. And so that's where I would definitely recommend that you bring all those things. But I would say I would not take any chances, and I would still bring that to our interview as well. And you can even ask the raters if they want to see it, and usually they would take a look at it. So the answer would be yes. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go back to the different types of interviews. There's also 2 different kinds of maybe different. So a presentation style, which is when the interviewee will, before the interview, prepare a presentation on the subject. So for me, for instance, sometimes I do like let's say a driver trainer. Then they're going to be, given a task of a subject to present to people so that we can assess their presentation skills, and that will be part of the interview. And sometimes there's a role playing. So let's say you're going to be a radio telephone operator. We want to see how you handle phone calls and how you hold up under stress. So then the role play would all be part of the interview as well. When it comes to different types of questions, we have, general fitness type of question would be, tell us how your background has prepared you for this job. A behavioral type of question would be, as a job supervisor, you will have to manage your own time, priorities, and resources to complete your assignments in an effective and efficient manner. Please give us a specific example from your current or previous job that demonstrates your ability to manage your own time and workload effectively. So how would you behave in a particular situation? A situational question would be, an example would be, assume you are the project manager at a construction site. All of a sudden, the contractor starts arguing loudly with the inspector, and you fear that it may become physical. What will you do? So it's asking you, how would you handle this situation? And then we have the technical question. So it'll be along the lines of, discuss the legal and practical significance of the pesticide label in structural pest management. So when you're answering the questions, there's a couple of, like a 3-step process that maybe you can keep in mind. First of all, understand what the question is really getting at. What are they asking you? And then you want to make sure that you answer the question effectively, but also concisely. You don't want to be rambling on or start talking about things that might not be relevant to the topic. So you want to answer the real question by presenting your related skills and back it up with real examples, specific examples from your experience. Like, this is what I have done. This is what I can do. Make sure that you drive that home to the raters. So a good way to answering questions effectively is by using what we call the STAR format. And so it's the situation, task, action, and results. method. So you want to give an overview of the situation first, and then you want to describe the task, and then you'll talk about what you did, the actions that you took, and then give a summary of the results. What was the outcome? So for this would be an example. Well, my coworker Bill needed to make a presentation to a potential customer about Widgets 3000, which was a new product. So that's a situation, right? Bill was unfamiliar with the product and came to me for advice since I was considered an expert on Widgets 3000. So that's a task. Over the course of 5 days, I trained Bill on Widgets 3000. At the end of the 5 days, I asked him to dry run his presentation to make sure that he had mastered what I had taught him. That's the action. And lastly, Bill presented to the potential customer and was able to answer all their questions about Widgets 3000. The customer decided to buy the product and is now very pleased with the relationship with the company. So that's the results. So you see how that goes, and it's pretty straightforward, to the point, but it's covering all of this. It gives the rater a really good understanding of what you were doing, why you were doing it, and what happened. So how do you make sure that you're prepared for an interview? Well, I highly recommend that you keep an ongoing journal of your accomplishments, because you're probably not going to remember them when you sit in the interview. It's going to be not really at the tip of your tongue. And you're going to be walking out of there, and then you're going to be thinking, oh man, why didn't I think of this? This would have been an excellent example. So you want to avoid that. And then review those accomplishments before the interview. And do that with the competencies in mind. You're going to know what competencies you're going to be assessed on, right? Because of the job bulletin, and possibly even the invitation letter will mention what the competencies are. And so then you look for the examples that are appropriate for that interview. And you're going to have them and rehearse them, and you're going to come in and you're going to feel so good and you're going to feel so confident that you're going to just blow them away. So real quickly, we're going to go over some of the do's and don'ts. Obviously, you want to answer the question, which sounds silly, but you'd be surprised how many times people come in and just talk and talk, and they actually don't address the actual question. So you make sure that you understand what they're asking and that you're answering it completely. And so this is also where it goes back to what I was just talking about, how you have those accomplishments in your little journal, and that you go over and rehearse ahead of time so that you don't ramble and go off on a tangent. And if you don't have a good answer, you don't want to repeat something that you already talked about, because it's not going to sound like you have very limited experience. And so instead, you can actually, and please, I want you to, as much as you can be relaxed in the interview. And so, you can ask them to come back to that question at a later time. Moving on might kind of snap you out of that brain freeze a little bit. And you can have the question repeated if you want to, if you don't understand it, or if it's a little too long, so that you kind of lose track of all the different test parts.
Questions during the interview, kind of bring a notepad or index card so I can recall my accomplishments, and where can I write the success stories?
Okay, so here's a question. During an interview, can I bring a notepad or index card so I can recall and remember my accomplishments? Yes, absolutely. Definitely you can do that. And you can even take notes if you think of something when you speak. So that's a very good tip, actually. I would recommend you do that. And then another question is, where can I write my success stories, etc.? Well, it's up to you, whatever's most convenient for you. I do mine electronically, so I have a little, a Word document that I just add things to. Some people prefer to do, like a good old-fashioned journal and just collect it that way. So whatever fits your needs better. What about my resume? Should I even offer to give a copy to the raters? You know what? It's like I was mentioning before. At this stage of the test process, when we're just getting your name on the eligibility list, it's not going to hurt to do it. So you can always do it, but it's not like you're going to be docked if you don't do it. And if you feel like you're in doubt, I would actually contact the analyst in charge for that particular exam. But I would rather bring it than not, right? And then we have another question. Please tell your panels we are being told that we can do. Oh, okay. So I don't know if that person had an experience where they've been told that they can't bring any notes. I have never heard of that, but I would still bring it, and if the raters give you a hard time, I guess maybe you can put it down. You don't want to maybe make them angry or upset with you, and at least you can use it up until the interview to kind of refresh and your mind. But I tell my raters certainly that they, you guys, when you come in, you're more than welcome to take notes and bring notes that you take. You can't do anything about your test questions. You can't take notes of them and bring home with you, obviously. All right, so the other thing from this slide, going back to the training that I want to emphasize, and it's a huge thing that's so important. Use I statements. The raters don't care what your coworkers did or what your team did. They want to know what you did, what your part is. So I know that we're trying to be modest, but this is really not the place for modesty. So make sure that you're talking about you and your accomplishments. Know your audience, and don't assume that the raters are going to know something or not know something, and so avoid jargon, and be clear and concise in your answers. And if you're not really sure whether to include something, it's better to spell it out than to leave it out. And then make sure you're a little nervous, perhaps, so maybe it's a good thing to remind you that to be tactful and professional, and to avoid appearing to be rude or pushy. You never know how you're going to act when you're nervous, but keep that in mind. Also, you don't want to be whining or complaining about anything, really, especially not your past or current employer. Be positive, make them smile and show you that you're like a person that you want to be around. So be confident and show enthusiasm, and show them that you really want this job, that you have a passion for it. Oh, we just got an excellent question here. Thank you so much for the person who asked this. When asked at the end of the panel interview if there's anything else that I would like to add, would I recommend that you point out other strengths or skills that were not discussed? And what about questions? So asking questions about the job, you certainly can, but remember that these are not people that are hiring authority. So they may not know a lot of the questions that they're experts on the particular job, but they're not going to be hiring, we're keeping them separate. We don't want the hiring authorities to be interviewing you. So you can certainly ask the questions, but they may not know it. But when it comes to that last question, is there anything else you'd like to add? Thank you so much for bringing this up, because it slipped my mind. I recommend that ahead of time, when you do all your rehearsal, you're talking out loud to yourself, and you're in front of a mirror maybe, whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable talking about yourself and your job and your accomplishments, I recommend that you think about all the things that you want the rating panel to know about you as it relates to this job. Write it down. Make sure that, I want them to know this and this and this and this. At the end of the interview, if there's stuff that you didn't touch on already, that's the time to do it. So that's when you're absolutely, you really, that's what you should add. That's what that question's for. If you feel like there's something that you can contribute to this job that you haven't already gotten a chance to show and illustrate throughout the interview, this is the time to do it. Thank you so much for asking that question. I think that's hugely helpful to all of you guys, actually. All right, so getting back to, we're nearing the end of the presentation here. So I wanted to kind of give you this rule, the 12-12-12 rule. So know that you will be judged by your appearance 12 feet away, 12 inches away, and your first 12 words. So don't underestimate the impact of your first impression. And, obviously it's important to be, behaving in a professional manner. And so some of the things to think about to accomplish this is to dress professionally, think about your handshake, not too loose, not too firm. Eye contact is huge. You want to seem approachable. Make sure you're answering questions honestly and positively. And please remember to turn off your cell phone. That goes for the raters too, by the way. I've had that happening where a rater had his cell phone ring during an interview, and that's just not good. And if you are, like we're going back to that question before, if you're bringing copies of work samples, resumes, etc., make sure that they're clean, crisp copies. And then remember to thank the raters when you leave. So these are, a couple of things to think about when it comes to interviews. If you want more information, and I know that the interview is a huge part that people have a lot of questions about, I highly recommend you sign up for next week's session by my colleague Zach. He's going to be giving you a ton of great tips when it comes to interviews. So that's really it for me today. I'm going to be available to answer questions for a little bit, so please keep them coming. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you now know a little bit better what to expect from our job test processes and how to prepare better so that you can feel more confident going in, because it has a lot to do with that, especially in the interview. And please let me know how it goes. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
All right, on behalf of Organizational Excellence, we'd like to thank all of you for participating in today's webcast. We'd appreciate it if you'll return to the Learning Zone to fill out a program evaluation, which you'll find under your My History tab in the Learning Zone. And while you're there, sign up for the remaining webcast in this series, which is Interviewing Techniques on May 15th. And thank you for attending, and we'll stay around for a couple minutes in case anyone has any additional questions.